Swans. The Beggar. Album. Review. Oxygen. I'm a fairly big fan of the post-rock, experimental rock band Swans. It's some physical media on from and they've recently come out with a new album, a new 2023 album, The Beggar. This is like, it came out after one of the biggest kind of breaks between albums, not counting the like decade-long break where they broke up, they came back together, that kind of thing. New album, The Beggar. It's about 2 hours long, and a few nights ago I listened to it, and then I listened to it again and again and again. This album opens very beautifully with the first track, the Parasite. At the start of this song, kind of has this slow plucked guitar, which kind of speeds up as frontman of the band, Michael Jura, begins to describe something. I feel like it's the relationship between a parasite and a host. Lyrics like "come to me," "feed on me," those kind of things. The way the guitar kind of tumbles around in the first half of this track reminds me. You ever see like midgets? No, like elven villages. You know, like the water wheels and stuff. Yeah, remind me a little bit of that. Other lyrics on this song that stuck with me include things like "breathe my breath into your head, righteous, pure, and sour with death," which I feel like kind of a little bit of a microcosm for the general lyrical content of this album. Very focused on mortality, very focused on death, on passing on, which could be in reference to frontman Michael Jura's age. He's almost 70, so I think he's really thought about that a lot recently. Could also be about the band itself, kind of disarming. There's a popular theory that this is the last album they will release in their current form, which makes sense given this song, given names of certain tracks on the album, like "Michael is Done" and "No More of This." But I think also it could just be the focus on mortality is due to a lot of this album was written over lockdown. And really in that first lockdown, everyone was kind of more scared than they should have been. People were thinking about death a lot. And kind of going into the second half of this song, all the instrumentation cuts out and you have Michael chanting "come to me, feed on me," and it's this really weird, low, deep voice. His vocal performance on this song in general is exceptional and one of his best ever. The second half of this song is a little closer to what people, I guess, would expect from Swans. You have kind of the drone aspect to these synths. You have kind of female backing vocals. Oddly reminiscent of something from the pre-breakup material, stuff like Soundtracks for the Blind. Works as an amazing introductory track for this album because there's a lot of just beautiful instrumentation. It's very open, it's very cathartic, and I feel like that's something that this album has that a lot of Swans albums don't usually have. The second track on this album, Paradise Is Mine, it's a little more by the book Swans than a lot of the other songs on this album. It was released as a single, so maybe I've just had more kind of time to digest it. But it really is typical Swans. You know, you have the big build up, you have the low vocals, it's a little scary at times. In terms of flow, like the track order, this album feels really weird. I don't know. I've seen the vinyl track list and I know it's different from the one released on streaming. Haven't listened to it in that order because I don't have any physicals yet. But it seems to make a little more sense than a streaming one. Although I think this album, even in any order, is more its parts than the sum of them. In terms of tracks where they really just hammer down this brutal, bleak instrumentation, you've got the bass, you've got the drums, and you've got the vocals. This is a standout, one of my favorites, like not only on this album, but of this kind of Swans song generally. I love in the second half of the song, there's these weird kind of creaking noises and stuff. A lot of these unidentifiable sounds remind me a lot of the 2014 album, To Be Kind, which I love a lot. Following on to the third track on here, Los Angeles, City of Death, we continue with the more kind of intense instrumental performance that we saw in the previous track. This song's pretty short for like the modern Swans standards, coming in at only about 3.5 minutes. I don't have much to say about this song. I think At first, this one was also released as a single, and I liked it a lot back then, but it's kind of grown off me since it released. I don't know. I think Michael's vocal performance is a little strange, a little silly or weird, but not in the way that, like, a song like Oxygen, you know. Still one of the better tracks on the album. It's just, I don't like it as much as I initially did. But I wonder what Harmon thinks about it.
What I really liked was the heavenly character, which was depicted by some of the lyrics near the start of the song. Gathering our tongues, here he comes, here he comes. This depicted the idea of a heavenly being or plague, which it was coming and it was being rumored. The following lines, tunneling the ground, swallowing the sound. It backs up this idea that there's immense power and, it's creating fear and it's taking control almost with the amount of power it has. So yeah, I don't really listen to this kind of music, but I really enjoy this song, and I might give some of the other songs a listen and more songs from the album. But yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Harmon. Very eloquently put. The fourth track on this album, Michael Is Done, shifts the tone a little to something maybe a little more beautiful, a little more open, calmer than what's been shown so far. Kind of like the first half of that first track I was talking about. That seems to be one of the key tenets of this album, is that it's much more open, more beautiful than a lot of the more recent output. This track actually has grown on me a little bit since I first heard this album. I thought, similar to the last track, I thought Michael's performance was a little strange, a little childish, a little like a nursery rhyme. But I think it's definitely grown on me, and I like the slow build up of the song to the kind of ultimate climax at the end. The lyrics here are also a little mortal, a little kind of grim. They could also be about the band breaking up, as I've stated before, though. It's really hard to get a read on a lot of Swans lyrics. They're kind of cryptic at times. The thing I really love about this track, though, is the latter portion where we get that sort of build-up and release that people typically expect from Swans. Although, in terms of this, it's actually pretty different from what I've heard Swans tackle before in this way. Some very ethereal, beautiful passages, not even in the way that, like, say, The Glowing Man, that album was. Even then, it was a little claustrophobic, it was dark. The juxtaposition of these grim, bleak lyrics with this really beautiful instrumentation is pretty interesting. Makes this track very nice to listen to, fits very well in the album, seems very essential to the album, actually. Although the first half, I don't know if I dig the first half so much as people have been saying online. It's good. I really like this one. The same can't really be said about the next track, Unforming, which I think, while it's okay, it's probably my least favorite on this album. The lyrics are just redundant, the instrumental isn't all that special. Anything you've heard up to this point on the album happens here, and it's not that much different. Everything here's done better on other tracks. It doesn't drag the album down, I don't think. I just don't understand its purpose, really. Following this, though, following one of the more kind of ethereal, light songs, comes what's probably my favorite track on here, which is the title track to the album. Instrumentally, it's just really strong. It's really intense. It starts with this sort of tense, stripped back, more quiet instrumental texture. Michael displays some of those poignant and strong lyrics on the album. Things like, what if I keep the power I give you, will I then decide to live? I don't know what that means, but it's cool. The instrumental less builds and builds up so much as it kind of keeps going and going, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and you're a little tense. And then Michael's performance grows louder, more angry, until eventually this song explodes. Oh my god, it blows up as this massive wall of sound. I'd say similar to A Little God in My Hands from To Be Kind, the way that song kind of goes and then it explodes, and then it builds up again, and then it explodes again at the end, which this song also does. I like the butt sex moan on this song. It's pretty funny. Following this, we have the track No More of This. This song, like lyrically and sonically, feels kind of final, conclusive. Pretty obvious by the title. This song continues with the more kind of relaxed, calmer soundscapes from previously in the album. The lap steel guitar in this track sounds almost tropical, or at least as close to that as you could probably get with Swans. What I don't know is on the vinyl track order, this is the last song, which might make a little more sense than it being just stuck in the middle like this. Regardless, I think this song is incredible. adds so much to the themes and atmospheres of the band being done, or of Michael being done, or of Michael dying. A conclusive song. The 8th track here, Ebbing, definitely a highlight of the album. Reinforces these kind of mortal death themes, and then also kind of deviates from what came before it in a sense. This song actually reminds me more than anything else here of the album Soundtracks for the Blind, of the longer, more epic songs on that, like Helpless Child, like the sound, the way it kind of, you get the first half and you get all the lyrics, and then about halfway through the song, it reaches this climax, and from there they're just going on and on and on about it, instrumentally, of course. Definitely a highlight of the album. Nothing I could say here could come across how good this is. One of the best Swans songs I think I've heard in a long time. The next track, titled Why Can't I Have What I Want Anytime I Want, honestly wasn't super memorable to me when I first heard the album. It's alright. It's alright. I mean, it's got the same, not issue, but the same kind of thing as Unforming had, where it's just the rest of the album. If you've heard the rest of the album, this doesn't do too much different so much as it just does more of the same. I think regardless of that, it's still a pretty great song though. This next track is pretty special. It's called The Beggar Lover 3, and it is currently the longest song Swans have released officially, coming in at like just under 44 minutes. They've had longer songs before. The Glowing Man title track was almost half an hour long. The Seal on The Seal, that was also about half an hour, right? But this one's much longer. This song doesn't really try to do the same things those songs were doing though. Despite its length, it is still incredibly engaging. It kept me entertained for like the total runtime. This song, kinda unbeknownst to me on first listen, because I've only heard a few Swans albums, actually interpolates and borrows other parts of songs by them. I caught The Glowing Man. There were aspects there that I was like, oh my god, I think I've heard this before from that song. Turns out they did it with lots of older Swans songs. This is something they haven't really done before, other than I guess you could say the Giraffe solo project, The Body Lovers, which was like a 70-minute long sound collage thing. I'm not too sure what it is really. But I think the borrowing of tracks here works to create something that's really, it's what Swans have been building up to this point. And Michael Giraz actually stated that this seems to be the direction he's going to take further music in if he's working under the Swans name. Which, I anticipate if that's the case. This song was really good. The very dark atmosphere throughout most of the thing. Although I don't think that's a detriment to the album. I don't think if this was released on its own, it would be any worse or it would be any better. It goes without saying, this is one of the biggest achievements for the band thus far. And to close off the album, we have the track The Memorious, which at first I didn't really remember too much about. I remembered the start kind of scared me because it was like 2 a.m. when I was listening to it for the first time. Michael comes in and before the instruments, it's really weird. On repeat listens though, I really love this song. I think it works fairly well as a closer, although probably not as much as like No More Than This or Ebbing. I think either of those would have worked maybe better as a closer for the album. This song's pretty heavy actually in comparison to, I guess, those other ideas I had for how it could end. I know it's a sentence I've said a lot today, but this album really is kind of a chameleon. The drums and guitars and bass are just pummeling, and Michael's doing this kind of spoken word, almost soft vocal delivery, which of course builds up into this beautiful, grim, dark climax. Oh my god, I like this song more than I did at first. I do think this is a much better song than it is a closer for the album though. Both in like a literal and metaphorical sense, I think this album takes from a lot of the Swans projects before it. Obviously the Beggar Lover has all the interpolations from Leaving Meaning and a lot of their albums. But I do really think a lot of the tracks here sound like evolutions or the next stage of certain songs or albums they've put out. I mean, I've mentioned To Be Kind a few times. I've mentioned Soundtracks for the Blind. I've mentioned The Glowing Man. Overall, I don't think this feels like a step back for the band. I don't feel like they're retreating into familiar territory or anything. I think this album, as I've said, is definitely much less the sum of its parts than it is the parts. Just some incredible songs on here. I would not be too mad if this was the last kind of project in this iteration of Swans. I think it works well as a conclusive piece to the long discography. Would I recommend to Swans fans? Yes, absolutely. Go and listen to this album right now. What are you doing? Would I recommend this to non-Swans fans? I think it's probably a better entry point into the music than, say, Soundtracks for the Blind. I think if you're gonna get into them through any means, listen to this. Listen to Be Kind. I think both those albums are pretty great in terms of showcasing what the band has to offer without throwing you into the deep end. Here's how I'd rank the tracks on the album, and then here's how I'd rank it in terms of the other Swans albums that I've heard this far.
I steal all the oxygen.